Hi everyone. In this lesson, we're going to learn how to simplify rational expressions. To simplify, we're going to use our factoring techniques, and also we're going to get into excluded values. Okay, and these values are the ones that make the expressions undefined. And I'll show you some examples of those in a bit. Um, some of the factoring that we're going to go over is going to be GCF. So for example, if I have an expression that looks like this, 3x minus 12, the GCF is 3 because 3 could divide both 3x and 12. So if I factor out the GCF, it would look like this. So it's basically the opposite of the distributive property. Um, we're also going to work on factoring trinomials. Okay. And then some of these expressions might look like this: x squared minus x minus 42. So just as a reminder, to factor this trinomial out, we're looking for numbers that multiply to negative 42 and add up to negative 1. So these numbers are, so 42, 7 times 6, but to add up to negative 1, the 7 has to be negative. So now you're gonna use those two numbers to write your factors out: x minus 7 and x plus 6. Okay. Now we're gonna use this to simplify rational expressions. Remember, when we say rational expressions, we're thinking about fractions. So let me show you an example now. Let's go with 8x minus 48 over x squared minus 10x plus 24. All right, so we have a big fraction here. We want to find ways to factor so we could simplify it. So I'm focusing on the numerator. What is the GCF of 8x minus 48? And the GCF is going to be 8. And you're left with x minus 6 on the inside. Now in the denominator, we have a trinomial. So what multiplies to 24 and adds up to negative 10? Yes, negative 6 and negative 4. So now my factors are x minus 6, x minus 4. Now in this big fraction now, there's things that we could simplify out. Since we have the same thing on top and in the bottom, x minus 6, you could cross them out. So the rational expression simplifies to 8 over x minus 4. And that's the most simplified way. There's nothing else you could simplify. Now for the excluded value. So remember, these are values that make the expressions undefined. And just as a reminder, what happens when you divide any number by 0? For example, 7 divided by 0. Undefined. it's an error. You cannot divide by 0. So looking at this expression here, which value for x is going to make this 0? In other words, x minus 6 is equal to 0. So x is equal to 6. And in the other factor, x minus 4 is equal to 0, but x is equal to 4. So these are the excluded values, 6 and 4. Let's get into another example. Okay, so we have x plus 3 over x squared plus x minus 6. Focus on the numerators. There's nothing you could factor, so I'm just going to write it over again. Now for the denominator, what multiplies to negative 6 and add up to 1? So 3 and 2 multiply to 6. The 2 must be negative because 3 plus negative 2 will give you the positive 1. So you're going to write our factors, x plus 3, x minus 2. So I could simplify these out. Those two go away. So I'm left with 1 over x minus 2. And then for the excluded values, what makes this expression 0? Negative 3 and positive 2. Those would be the excluded values for this one. Let's try another example. Okay, we have 12 over 20x plus 4. I'm sorry, this is supposed to be 20x plus 4. Okay, so in the numerator, there isn't much you could do, but in the denominator, we do have a GCF. The GCF is 4. So you're left with x plus 1 times 4. Now the numerator, I'm gonna change it up a little bit. Since I factor out of 4, what's 12 divided by 4? It's 3, right? So I could rewrite 12 as 4 times 3. So now I could simplify the 4's out. So I'm left with 3 over x plus 1. For this one, there's only one excluded value. What is going to make the denominator 0? Negative 1. Because negative 1 plus 1 is 0. So this one only has one excluded value. Okay, let's try a couple more examples and you should be ready for your practice. Let's see, we have 8x squared over 28x squared plus 28x. Okay, so let's start with the denominator first. What's the GCF? It's like 28x is the GCF. So what are you left with? 28x times x would give you the 28x squared. And then 28x times 1 will give you the 28x. Okay. On the top we have 8x squared, so I'm going to actually expand that to 8x times x. I expanded it because I want to simplify some stuff out. Notice I could cross out an x and an x now. Those two go away. And then you can simplify the 8 over 28. 8 is the same thing as 4 times 2. And 28 is the same thing as 4 times 7. So now I can cross out the 4's. So now your final answer is going to be whatever you're left with, 2 times x over 7 times x plus 1. And now for the excluded values, okay, what makes this 0? -1, and there's also another one. 28 times what number? So I'm talking about here. I know I crossed it out, so it looks a little messy, but 28 times what number gives you 0? 0. So 0 and -1 are the excluded values for this rational expression. All right, let's do one more. Oops. Let's go with x squared minus 2x minus 8 over x squared plus 8x plus 12. All right, so you have a trinomial for the numerator and denominator, so we're going to factor those. Okay, for the top, what multiplies to -8 and adds up to -2? I know 4 times 2 is 8, and the 4 has to be negative. So this turns into x minus 4, x plus 2 over, and then for the bottom, what multiplies to 12 and adds up to 8? 2 times 6 is 12, and 2 plus 6 is 8. So our factors are x plus 2 and x plus 6. Okay, now we look for things that we could simplify. So this 2 cross out nicely. So our answer is x plus 4 over x plus 6. And that's it. Careful, do not do this. Do not cross out the x and the x. That's not allowed. You could only cross out values that are being multiplied. X is being added, so you cannot cross it out. Okay, and then finally for our excluded values, what makes this 0? -2, and what makes this 0? -6. All right, thank you. If you have any questions, please send me an email. Your homework problems are also posted on PowerSchool. Do them on a separate sheet of paper or download it and do it on Notability. And make sure you upload the assignment when you're complete. Thanks.